Morning, everyone. Sorry that this has been a relatively interrupted series, but we have to move on. So, Tosfos points out that Hotzaah is unique in that it has psukim that explicitly mention it as a Tosfos Ivim Masal Poshat. There has psukim that explicitly mention it as a melacha. Not only, which seems unnecessary, with all other melachos, all the Torah says is Louise melacha, and it leaves us to work out what the melachos are based upon the Mishkan and other criteria that we've spoken about, and with Hotzaah not. And not only is there one pasuk, but there are indeed two pasukim. Now, Tosfos by us doesn't ask the question. The Mashal already points this out. He doesn't ask why you need two pasukim. All Tosfos comments on is why do you need any pasukim whatsoever. And Tosfos answers because of melacha gerua, and we'll see several variants of what exactly melacha gerua means. But there's something inferior about Hotzaah, something that would lead us not to realize that it is a melacha. And therefore, Hotzaah, unlike Bishul and Choresh and Zoreah, needs a pasuk to tell us that it's a melacha. Broadly speaking, what's the weakness of Hotzaah? That it doesn't affect any visible construction change in the world. When you bake bread, it's gone from raw dough to bread. When you weave threads together, you now have a cloth instead of a thread. With Hotzaah, nothing like that has happened. Nonetheless, location, moving location of an object is significant enough to be a melacha, but that's what we need the pasuk to teach. Tosfos doesn't ask why do we need two pasukim to tell us that. Tosfos asks it elsewhere in Shavuos and so on, and the Mashal points this out. But we're going to talk about why we need two pasukim. I'm sorry. Sorry, I've got myself the wrong way around. Tosfos by us asks why we need two psukim. Tosfos in Shavuos asks why do we need any psukim. Tosfos doesn't address that question over here. Tosfos assumes that you need psukim and just explains why you need two psukim. Okay. So what's his answer to the question? Why do we need two psukim? So Tosfos in our Tosfos answers that you need two psukim for Hotzaah of the Oni and for Hotzaah of the Balabais. That's Tosfos' answer to the question. So our Mishnah, our Mishnah is a problem Mishnah. Had we been writing our Mishnah, we wouldn't have written it anything like that. All we would have said is that the melachot of Hotzaah is whether you're taking something in or out. And then we would have said that there's drabbanons of Hotzaah if you do part of the melacha, not the whole melacha. And more or less, this is how the Rambam summarizes the Mishnah, but that's not how Tosfos, not how our Mishnah does it. And Tosfos picks up on that, and Tosfos says that there is a conceptual difference between the Hotzaah of the Oni and the Hotzaah of the Balabais, and this explains why you need two psukim. Now, which way round are the psukim, and what is the logic of the distinction? So, I just want to share. I printed this in the Rishonim sheets in the second lot of source sheets that were given out. And one of the sources I printed is the Chedushay Haran, the Miyuchosim one. This is on the bottom of page 2. Does everyone have these sheets? Yeah. And people realize we're going to focus on Tosfos Poshat. I know it was a while back, but I did say that in the last time we left. This is the Tosfos that we're going to. I hope everyone's with me here in this. Yeah. This is okay. Okay, so the run. Maybe I'll summarize it outside just in the interest of time. The run says that I put it in bold. He says that the reason you need the two psukim is because one is moitzi and one is machnis. So were we just to learn Tosfos, we might think that there's a difference between an oni and an osher. That's the critical difference between the two. The Ram tells us that that the chiluk is whether you're being moitzi or machnis, whether you're taking in or out. Now, the Ramban says, and I printed the Ramban also on page 1, and I printed the Rishonim in their order of the generational order, but in us going through it, it's a little bit easier to go the other way around. The Ramban says that the Hotzaah of the Oni is the stronger malacha, the more obvious candidate to the malacha, because he says derech adam limshoch la'atzmai, and that's the malacha chashava, whereas the Balabayas, who's being moitzi, is taking it into a rishus where he isn't. And that's what the Ramban says. In Tosfos, you have to say that each one has a different strength and weakness, a pro and a con. So let me just try and explain what I'm saying over here. If you need two pasukim, one for Oni and one for Balabais, or in the language of the Ran, one for being Moitzi and one for being Machnis, it must be that we couldn't learn one from the other. In other words, there's a number of stages. Stage number one is I'm reluctant to accept that Hotzaah is a malacha at all. The pasuk says lo sartik malacha. I can think of 38 activities which cross the threshold of being malacha, but whoever dreamt that Hotzaah is a malacha. Okay, no, we have psukim to teach us Hotzaah is malacha. I wouldn't have thought so because it's a malacha grua, but nonetheless we learn it is a malacha. Okay, now that I know it's a malacha, I have a question: is it only Hotzaah or is it only hachnasa? Or maybe it's both. So we need two psukim to teach us it's both. If you need two psukim to teach us it's both, it means evidently that you couldn't learn one from the other. Arguably either way around, or maybe just one way around, not the other way around. So the Ramban says that bringing something to yourself is a stronger candidate to be a malacha than moving something away from you. In other words, if we only had one pasuk, we would learn that to mean bringing something to yourself, and we'd say that's a malacha, but moving something away from you isn't a malacha. Don't know, we'll come to that in a moment, but I'm just saying the facts, the maths of what the Rambam says. That bringing something to myself, if I had one pasuk to teach me Hotzaah, not two pasukim, I'd say, okay, the Torah teaches me that bringing something to myself is a malacha, but moving something away from me isn't a malacha. Therefore, I need two pasukim. This is what the Rambam says. Tosfos phrases it a little differently. Tosfos says, I need both. You could have argued for Hotzaah, for bringing something to me to be the stronger malacha. You can argue for moving something away from me for being the better malacha. And therefore we need both to teach us both. You could argue each has a different strength and a weakness, and we wouldn't be able to extrapolate one from the other. So again, just to summarize before we understand what this means, okay, we wouldn't have thought Hotzaah is a malacha at all, but the pasuk tells us it is a malacha. Okay. But which variant of Hotzaah is a malacha? According to Tosfos, neither variant can automatically tell us the other variant is the malacha, and you need both. According to the Ramban, if you knew that bringing something to you is a malacha, then you would be able to say, if you knew that moving something away from you is a malacha, you'd be able to say, kavachoma, moving something to you is a malacha, because moving something to you is a better candidate for being a malacha than moving something away from you. This is the maths of what they say. Now, in a minute, we'll have to understand, as Gary asked, what's the logical reason behind this, but I just want to spell out the maths of what the Rishonim are telling us over here. Yes?
The words Hotzaah and Hotzaah, is it always, as you said, moving away and towards wherever you are, or is it from Hotzaah, or is it the other Rabbizobin?
So the Rishonim use the terms differently in this context. And this is one of the points I'm going to get to, that this is part of the confusion, whether we mean objectively from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, or subjectively about where the person is standing. The Ramban uses subjective language, for example, but we'll have to work out. The Ramban says it's about whether it's bringing to me or moving away from me. Tosfos says it's about Hotzaah Dani and Hotzaah of the Balabais. We have actually mathematically three candidates for what the distinction is over here. Is the distinction which direction Rishus-wise it's going, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah? Is the distinction whether it's coming to me or away from me? Or is the distinction Oni and Oshi? And this is all part of the, this is why I printed so many sources, and this is why I said that we're going to have to work hard on this. This is all part of the confusion. Yeah. We will see, unfortunately, we will see machlokas in the Rishonim about which pasuk is which also. And this is somewhat going to depend on this issue. I'm afraid I have no comfort for anyone here. This is all part of the confusion. I spent a long time working on this. I tried to put in bold as much as I could, but this is also the confusion. There's different Rishonim argue explicitly differently about which pasuk they think is referring to which. Amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Is the Asher not finished with the Yachid and the Ani?
The Oni is standing in the Rosh Hashanah. The Osher is standing in Rosh Hashanah. But the question is the distinction between which actor, the other end, which actor is acting, or is the distinction direction of travel? And if the distinction is direction of travel, is that subjective or objective? So there are three possible chilukim floating around over here. Who's doing it? Is it the Oni doing it or the Osher doing it? Which direction are we going objectively? Is it Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah? And finally, which direction are we going subjectively? Is it drawing it close to me or moving it away from me? Okay. Now, once I bring that clarity to us, that there are three possible candidates for what the distinction is, and I'm no way of avoiding this. I just want to lay out my own understanding of what the Svaros would be. And this isn't spelled out by the Rishonim, but Rabbi, let's pause and think. Is there a difference between the action of the Oni and the action of the Osher? Just as an actor, as the part involved. Is there logic to distinguish between the two? Please don't shake your head. What would be the logic? What's their motives and what they're doing? We've spoken before about first causes and secondary causes. Yeah. Yes.
Direction of gift.
Let's try and generalize the principle over here.
The Oni is initiating.
The Oni is the initiator of the process, and he's the goal. He's Sof Master b'machshava tchila, in a sense. He's the source of the original thing. The whole process is to get money to the Oni, to get a gift to the Oni. The Osher isn't doing a direct action. He's responding to something. Okay, just to bear that in mind in terms of motivation. Okay. Is there a difference between drawing something to me and moving something away from me? I don't want names of. Yeah, the Rishonim say yes, but logically, rationally, can we argue differences between the two? What would be the difference between the two? Right. Why would I want to get rid of something? And it's not negative, by the way. No malacha can be negative. So we're not talking about taking rubbish out of the house, because that would be a malacha shein tzrich legufa. Because I want it to exist in the external world. I'm going to label that manufacturing. I want the world to change. And what's hachnasa? About my own needs. When I bring something to myself, it's about my needs. When it's Hotzaah, it's about getting it into the world. So we can already hear the view of the Ramban and the view of Tosfos beginning to emerge from this. The Ramban says that hachnasa is always more choshev than Hotzaah. It's a stronger malacha. What does that mean? Because, again, we're troubled over here. 38 of the malachas are obviously external achievements. They're doing something. 39th isn't doing something. There's a chiddush that moving the location matters. So the Ramban says the easier chiddush to hear is moving the location to me. I've now, if all malachas are about creating useful things, then bringing this useful object to me is a malacha. I get it. I'm bringing it to myself. A loaf of bread, very nice. I've done 11 malachas to produce a loaf of bread, but all of that is useless, is worthless if I can't get the bread and eat it. So there's a 12th malacha, which is bringing the bread to me so that I can eat it. There's 5 malachas in manufacturing clothing, garments. Wonderful. Shearing wool and cleaning the wool and spinning into thread and weaving the thread together and sewing the pieces together. Fantastic. But if I can't get the clothing to me, then what have I achieved? So there's an additional malacha of Hotzaah. So Ramban thinks it's obvious to the Ramban that the most choshev aspect of Hotzaah is when I'm bringing it to me and bringing it to myself. If I'm moving it away from me, that's a less choshev achievement because it's a secondary achievement. I don't want it away from me, really. I want something, it's to help someone else get it. Tosfos doesn't see it like that. Tosfos sees it as objective. If malachos are manufacturing, then you can see that bringing it to me is the more choshev malacha because I get the loaf of bread. Or you could see it producing bread, exiting bread into the world is the more choshev malacha because I'm producing loaves of bread so that they exist in the world. If malachos are about creative industries, then bringing a bread to myself is subsistence farming, right? It's just I end up with a loaf of bread. If I'm a baker, it's producing bread, which is going elsewhere. So again, I don't have any rise for this. I just, once I became clear that I was unclear, once I became clear that the Rishonim are using 3 different sorts of savaras over here, I just want to share on a sort of mathematical level where we have to go with our thinking. You could argue Oni and Osher difference because the Oni is a first order need. The Osher is a second order need. The Oni needs it. He's the goal. The Osher is doing it in order to get it somewhere else. You could argue there's a difference between bringing it close to myself or moving it away from myself because of subjective needs, my own subsistence need versus producing it for the external world. And you could hear a chiluk between Rishus HaYochid and Rishus HaRabim in a very similar way, but objectively rather than subjectively. Rishus HaYochid is the place of consumption, of using things, and Rishus HaRabim is the place of movement. You don't ultimately want objects in Rishus HaRabim. No one produces an object so it can go on a lorry. You produce an object so that it can be used in a Rishus HaYochid. The Rishus HaRabim is merely a means to an end. On the other hand, you do produce objects they can go in lorries. If I'm a manufacturer, I've used an object because I don't want it to stay in my Rishus HaYochid in my factory. What's the point of having beautiful goods in my factory? It's only useful if it if it goes into a Rishus Rabbim and goes somewhere. And from my point of view, once I put it in the Rishus Rabbim, in a sense, I've done my job. I've given it to the Oni, who's the purchaser. He's now transporting it, and that's done. What's done is done. So the Rishonim are calling upon us to think with care. Number one of the chiddush that Hotzaah is atchul a melacha, and number two, once we know it's a melacha, what is the more obvious candidate for melacha, and what is the less obvious candidate for melacha? And I think from the Rishonim we have three ways of classifying the oni oshe chiluk, or the chiluk that's pertinent in the Mishnah. Is it whether it's to me or away from me, subjective? Whether it's from Rishus Rabbim to Rishus Yachid, Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabbim, objective about Rishus, or whether it's about actor, oni versus oshe. That's what comes out for me from the Rishonim. So you're looking puzzled. No? It's okay. Okay, so yes. Okay.
From showing I've seen that, I don't think there's they haven't seen the distinction of between the Ani and the Asher as an actor, because I think it's once you go back, because whenever you can make a distinction, you have to go back to the Pesukim. It doesn't mention at all any of the actors. So you wouldn't if you just looked at the Pesukim, you wouldn't think, oh, it's just going to.
So I want to argue there's a Rishon that does say that, and that's Tosfos. Look in the third line of Tosfos doing Masechet Shabbat. V'la v'gomin on Hotzaah oni mi balabais v'lo balabais ma'ani. So he says the chiluk is balabais and oni. Now we could explain that to mean direction of travel. We could explain that to mean bringing to yourself or not, or you can explain it to mean which the words Tosfos says oni and balabais. Now, I hear in a minute you're going to argue about the Pesukim. We'll come to the Pesukim in a moment. You asked before about Pesukim. We'll get to the Pesukim in a moment. But just in logic, these are mathematically the three chilukim you could make. And each of the three chilukim has a reasonableness to them. That's what I'm arguing. Now, you may disagree with me and say, no, Tosfos can't mean Oni and Oshe as the pattern of chiluk. You must mean one of the other chilukim. Fine. I'm not out to convince you of this. All I'm saying is that logically there are three distinctions you could draw, and certainly the simplest reading of Tosfos is he's drawing that distinction. Okay. Now, what's with the Pesukim? So I'm afraid, Rabbi, the same confusion in the Pesukim, and there's no shortcuts here other than just plodding away through the Rishonim to the best of ability. But it looks to me like the Ramban says that the pasuk of Vayichalei ha'am me'ahavi is Hotzaah the balabayis, and al yetze ishmin koma he seems to learn is the oni. This is how the Ramban seems to classify the Pesukim. And again, I put it in bold to try and save people too much hard work. So yes, the Ramban seems to say that the pasuk of Vayichalei ha'am is the balabayis, and the pasuk of al yetze ishmin koma is the oni.
But they do it because in the case of the man, people were collecting like that.
Oh, and the answer would be very simple. Because in the case of the mon, we are the oni collecting the mon. And in the case of Echale Omer Avi, we are the Oshe donating to the Mishkan. Yeah, so that's how the Ramban understood that. Now, is the pertinent distinction whether you're moving it away from yourself or bringing it to yourself, or is the pertinent distinction Oni and Oshe? We can argue. That gets back to Rafi's point. Rafi didn't like it in the Pesukim. I think you could learn it in the Pesukim as per Tosfos, but you could argue that the chiluk in the Pesukim is direction, giving or receiving, or you could argue the chiluk in the Pesukim is Oni and Oshe. But as you exactly said, if we learn Pshuto Shel Mikra, it's quite a convincing reading of Pesukim. This is how the Ramban learns it. The Veichalayam Avi Mehavi is the donors. It's Mamish in Yonah Yom. I'm saying we've just been through Pashas Truman Tzaveh. That's the Oshe, the Balabais, giving to the Mishkan, so acting in the place of the Balabais. And Veichalayam Avi is the Jews going out to collect them on. That's the Oni receiving the food. Yes, but what the posuk is focusing on, according to this reasoning, is the actors, or the first act of the actors, and therefore the significant act of the actors. The significant act of the Mishkan case is a donor, even though they have to take it out of their house into the Rishos Rabbim, into the streets of the Midbar, and then into the Mishkan. And the significant act of the Mon is the recipient, the Oni. So certainly if you learn it's about the actors, or maybe even if you learn about the significant act of the actors, that's how the Ramban reads the Pesukim. Tosfos Rosh says exactly the opposite way around, based on your point. The Tosfos Rosh seems to say that the pasuk of again, I print. I hope I did print the Tosfos Rosh. Yeah, I printed the Tosfos Rosh in source 5 again. I put the pertinent bits in bold. The Tosfos Rosh seems to say exactly the other way around. The Tosfos Rosh seems to say that the pasuk of Echalei Ha'om is going on Hotzaah of the Oni. Echalei Ha'om Havi is going on the Hotzaah of the Oni. The only way I can, if you look in Tosfos Rosh, he explains this. Let's just have a look at the Tosfos Rosh because he does explain a little bit more. This is in source 5 on page 3. The honey, I put this in bold, it's the ends of the first paragraph, I'm sorry, in the Tosfos Rosh. The honey tree cry, these two psukim, Nira Lafarish, V'chalei ha'om mehavi, the pasuk of V'chalei mehavi, Osi l'hotzah d'oni, it's coming for the hotzah d'oni. And he brings a Gemara to prove this, because Domin and Perikazerik, Moshe heicha havakoi, where was Moshe standing with Machan and Leviyah? Or Machan and Leviyah, Rosh Hashanah hava. The Machan and Leviyah is Rosh Hashanah. The Kamalun Moshe, and Moshe says, Lo safiku v'teisim Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah. Don't continue to bring out from the Rosh Hashanah, which is your private tent where you're storing your wealth, into the Rosh Hashanah. Veloshen vayichalei ha'mehavi, from bringing mashma mihavi al chayfetz a love, from bringing the chayfetz to him, to Moshe, l'makom shehu omed, where Moshe is standing, v'hainu hotzah da'oni v'al yetzish min komei, and the pasuk of al yetzish min komei, hainu hotzah da'balabayis, because the mashma lishna al yotzi mimakom shehu omed v'bayis lachutz. Don't take out from the place where you're standing in the bias into the outside. Okay, so the Tosfos Rosh learns it exactly the other way around. He pictures, excuse me, based on the Gemara, that Moshe is standing in the public square of the Machane Leviyah, and he's asking everyone to bring him to the Machane Leviyah, and therefore people are taking out of the Rishos HaYachid into the Rishos Harabim, which is therefore Hotzaah Oni, because you're going from the Rishos Harabim into the Rishos, from the Rishos HaYachid, I'm sorry, into the Rishos Harabim. So again, I don't fully understand all of this, but sorry?
Then only it is the person inside the Shekhi.
Yes.
Carrying it to Shekhi.
Yes. So he is defining the Oni as the person standing in the Rishos Harabim, and therefore the one doing the act of bringing it into the Rishos Harabim, which is always the Oni, because the Oni is one standing in the street, is here defined as the Oni. Yes. 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 And nonetheless, even though the Jew taking this, Israelite taking this, is an Osher because he's the donor, and in terms of the actor, we would think he's more similar to the Osher than the Oni. Nonetheless, in terms of the act, he is bringing something to come to rest in the Rishos Harabim by putting it in front of Moshe, and therefore the Tosfos Rosh is calling that the Oni, not the Osher. Yeah, and that's again part of this confusion, that depending on whether we think the critical distinction is the actor or the act, will also depend on how you read the psukim. So the Rosh is aware that, presumably, that in terms of the act, the Mon case is an act of collection, and the Mishkan case is an act of giving. Nonetheless, he doesn't care about that. He cares about what are you accomplishing. The goal of the Jews bringing their gifts is to bring gifts from their private storehouses, their private tents, to the public space, where it can be used for the Mishkan, the town square, the Machane Leviyah. And the goal of the people collecting the Mon is to bring bread, is to bring something into their house. And therefore the Mon collectors are the Osher, because they're dropping something off in their home. And the donors are the Oni, because they are dropping something off in the public space. And this is what I meant when I said I don't fully understand all of this, because, yeah, I don't really know where to go with this, other than I'm just saying the maths that I worked out. There are 3 pertinent chilukim floating around, and the logic that you see as relevant and the way you read the psukim will all be affected by these by these issues, these criteria. Best I can do. Yes.
Doran, but
Yes, inspired by Doran. Yes.
So, about the mission, the complexity of the Mishnah, why doesn't it simply say you're not allowed to move from Rishut to Rishut? And then could expand a little on that if one wanted to deal with Hanafana Akira, and it would also deal with Rishut HaYachid to Rishut HaYachid.
So next Shiur, we will look at the Rambam, who tidies all of this up and just abstracts the general principle. But in Tosfos' reading, the Mishnah is very good. because each of these acts are different. There's no way to summarize. You'll miss the whole nuance of the malacha if you simply say it the way we would have phrased it, which is don't move things from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah or the reverse. We would have missed that the actor matters, Oni and Osher. We would have missed that there's a logic to distinguish between direction of travel, and we would have missed that there's a logic to distinguish between whether you're bringing something to yourself or moving something away from you. So all these three distinctions emerge from the narrative of the Mishnah that we would miss if instead it just produced a sort of abstract law. Sorry, Rosh Hashanah is not malacha. We'll see that later. Malacha is only Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, the reverse. Yeah, Minatora, there's other movements of Rosh Hashanah are not chayiv Minatora. Yes.
I had the exact same thinking that Paul did. So, and I thought I'm slightly repeating what you're saying, but I thought what you're saying. The reason that the Mishnah didn't just say Reshut to Reshut,
Yes,
is that that's not intuitively enough for melacha, and therefore it has to introduce these three variables, which are adding more.
the bottom line is that at the end of the day, you are chayiv for all these combinations. So you could say the abstract and get away with it, but if you do that, you miss the nuance of each one being its own chiddush. At the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, does it make a difference if it's Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah or the reverse? Does it make a difference if you're an Oni and an Osher? Does it make a difference if you're bringing to yourself or moving away from yourself? The answer is no. All are identical. They're all simply melachot of Hotzaah. So in that sense, the Mishnah could have simplified things, but we would miss the fact that each of these are conceptually quite different nuances of how to do the malacha. So the Rambam does simplify it all. The Rambam cuts out all the stuff. He just says the bottom line: either direction, in or out, doesn't you're chayiv. But you're missing. One misses a whole subtlety in that each one needs its own pasuk and its own chiddush because you can't easily extrapolate from all of them. They're all doing something slightly differently. They're all avos melachos. I mean, they're all one av melacha, but there are differences. One is doing something my own need, the other one is manufacturing. One is my need, the other one is a means to someone else's need, a second order need, and so on. And these are differences that matter according to the Rishonim. But which differences are critical for reasons that I'm unable to explain? Different Rishonim choose different features, and based on that, read the psukim very differently. Very interesting. Yeah.
None of those viruses dictates with the content. None of them can involve a lot of your moving one thing. If you do something to different priorities.
Oh, so melacha gerua is the foundation of all of this. It begins with that. Since the change occurring is not an objective change in the physical nature of the object, therefore all these subtleties creep in. Inherent in the chiddush of melachas Hotzaah is that only a change from place of functionality to place of travel, and the reverse, is significant enough to be the melacha. That something like that is around melacha gerua, and that's a chiddush because you could have heard that even moving from my house to your house, if we have semi-detached houses and I move it straight from one to the other, from your back garden to my garden, could be enough. But no, from one Rosh Hashanah to another Rosh Hashanah is not the melacha. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here, and I wish everyone a good day. Thank you very much.